Hi there guys, Scrivo here. Welcome to the Inner Circle. This week we are going to run through the Darkangels WTC lists. So going through the unit frequency and then a breakdown of kind of how many they were taking in the lists, and then obviously breaking through the lists. So there was 8 lists in total. So what is the WTC? So the WTC, or the World Team Championships, is a 40k event where 40 nations are represented with 8 player teams. So that is 8 players that all play together under the same nation's flag. They're limited that they can only bring one of each faction. So if you take a Codex Space Marines army, you then can't take a second army that is Blood Angels. So if you had, say, Ultramarines, you couldn't then take Blood Angels. But you can have things like Grey Knights and a normal kind of Codex compliant Space Marines. So there is some kind of play to it. Similar limitations where if you have things like Imperial Agents or Chaos Demons, they can only be used once across the team as well. So there's some sort of comp to it, but it's a way of kind of giving a little bit of diversity, but also very much establishes that there'll be some skews. There's efficiency in the lists, so there'll be a list that is designed to do a very specific role. And they get paired, so you do there is a whole pairing process where if you go watch a video that I'm going to link up here, that when I did my Scrivo versus the World Series, it explains how the pairing process works. But essentially you put cards down, you blind put down what you're going to put out, then they put 2 cards down, and it's all very exciting, and it can create some really kind of skewed and interesting matchups where if you're doing the pairings correctly, your faction could be put into a very favourable matchup, or take out one of their favourable matchups, giving them a really big win, but then opening up the rest of the board. So it's very interesting. Obviously, go and watch that video after this if you want to kind of get a bit of an understanding of how the pairing process works. Right, so let's get straight into it because there's a lot of this to go through. So the one unit that was taken by every single country was Deathwing Knights. They had a 100% pick rate. There was 2 countries, Slovakia and Switzerland, that went with 2 units of 5, and then Canada, Germany, South Africa, Spain, Sweden, and USA all took 3. There is a slight variation as well. So generally, what I've found is a lot of countries, if they're picking a unit, 3 units, they'll have 2 units of maces and then 1 unit of swords. Obviously, the swords get the extra attack that they didn't have when they first started, when the sheet was first released in the Codex. They didn't get the anti-vehicle and anti-monster stuff, but getting an extra attack kind of gives them a different role. So I think that's interesting to see that they're kind of using both versions of it. The next most popular unit was the Apothecary Biologists. This was taken by 7 countries, so it was almost all of them. Only 1 didn't. This is generally so they can put Fire Discipline on the character, and then it'll be leading to Eradicators. This is a very popular thing even for singles. Very much I've seen it favoured a little bit more in the US kind of meta compared to the European and UK metas. I think there's a slight kind of a weird thing where at the moment I'm seeing a lot of UK lists feature Hellblasters. But equally, the Eradicators are starting to sort of dribble in. So last week, Innes Wilson took out the Northwest Open with a Gladius Dark Angels list, and I believe it had Eradicators in it. There were some other units in there that very much you'll see featured in here as well. So it was very much a love letter to this sort of style of list. So not just going to feature in teams, right? And then next, the Repulser. So this is one of the other ones that I've been kind of surprised by. Very much the UKTC kind of terrain. You don't seem as reliant on your transports, and if you do, it's bare bones, is what I'm seeing at the moment. The Repulser seems to feature a lot more heavily in the US meta at the moment, and so seeing that kind of in, so like the US and Canada list didn't surprise me too much. It is just the one. They are cheap enough to justify doing, so they're 180 points at the moment, if my memory's correct. If not, correct me in the description, in the comments, sorry, because I'm always getting stuff slightly wrong because there's a lot of information at the end of the day. So this kind of was an interesting one to me because I was like, I've been always trying to save points, and things like the Repulser being put down to an Impulser and then carrying a different unit. Obviously the change in the balanced data slate where they can fit 6 Gravis dudes and a character is huge, and that's probably why we're starting to see it a bit more. Then the next most popular, equally picked, was Scouts. 2 countries only took 1 unit of 5, and then the rest were in pairs, which doesn't surprise me. Generally, if I'm trying to build a list, it will feature 2 units of Scouts. It normally drops down to 1 if I'm really struggling for points, but normally that's the last thing to go. Then we've got Inner Circle Companions. So they feature in 6 of the lists, 6 out of the 8, which is not bad. It's mostly as a single unit, so a lot of the success we've been seeing over in the UK was taking 2 units of them and really pushing that hard. This seems to be more, they're taken as a piece to put a Judicia in and just fling it forward, whether it's in a transport or just staging. It seems to be doing a very specific role, and it's done once, but as a result the points are freed up to be put into something else like the Deathwing Knights. So rather than having 2 units of both, I think this is where that you have to get the cost saving kind of thing. Then Assault Jump Pack Assault Intercessors. They're in 6 lists as well. Spain only went with 1. Canada and Sweden went with 3. Slovakia, Switzerland and USA went with 2. I generally like putting 2 units in for scoring. What's interesting is when you see those decisions kind of as part of the lists, you kind of see why, especially when it's not always just about saving the points. Sometimes it's about, have you got enough stuff to do mission already? So like if you've already got scouts, do you need to have the jump packs? I don't know. There we go. Right, here you go, Eradicators. So this again, big glow up. So if you'd said to me at the end of Leviathan that everyone would be taking Eradicators, I would have been like, but why? And it's still, they are still great. They weren't awful before, but there was always a better option. And with it being quite dense boards, because even the light boards in WTC are still pretty heavy, having some nice tanky full re-rolling into vehicles and monsters dudes with fire discipline, it's just going to delete a tank. If you target the right thing, it's just going to delete it, and you don't have to then use your Oath of Moment on it, which is great. The next one, so 4 out of the 8 took a Judicia. Generally, to go with the Inner Circle Companions. At least that's what I'm assuming, because obviously from a list standpoint you don't have to put what you're actually putting them with, but we can make educated guesses, right? If there isn't something else it can go with, it's pretty self-explanatory. This is very much that aggressive push. There is Germany have 2 in their list, and I think this is an interesting list, so when we get to that you'll see why. Alright, and then we've got Infiltrators. This is another thing that towards the end of Leviathan we were seeing less of, but getting 4 countries taking them, it's that appreciation that if your army is just pushing forward, quite aggressive, you need something to stop the 3-inch deep strikes. So a lot of the codexes have got the ability to have a unit deep strike 3 inches, or they have a stratagem to do it as part of a detachment. So your Necrons having that kind of whole thing of they can just boop stuff up and down. Yep, it's a right pain. So having that to fix that is very useful. And 100 points does feel a lot at times, but if you're not putting in the Phobos Librarian, you can cope with that. That's only a few points more than buying 5 Intercessors that will do a similar job, sticky the objective, but it doesn't matter that they're sticking it if they're staying there. So, and then we've got Assault Intercessors. 4 countries took them. They took a pack of 5. So it's just for that little chip kind of combat damage, I imagine. They might be led, probably not though. Right, and then here's where it becomes less common. So USA and Germany took a pack of Voidsman arms. So a nice cheap battle line unit that is just fills a hole. The cheapest unit that Space Marines can take is 65 point scouts. They're not battle line, so with the new missions, if there is any that require and benefit you to have a battle line, they plug in and give you a nice cheap option for that. Covers your home objective, not as well as Infiltrators, but not bad. And then USA and Canada both have taken the Caladius Assassin still, or Calidus Assassin, sorry. What I find interesting is that I had been leaning away from this because I was just like, it's something you've got to use well now. You can't just hide it in a corner and go, I'm just going to vect one of your abilities. Now it has to be within that 12 inches. I think it creates a quite an interesting pressure piece. It still needs to be respected. It will die. But at the same time, if you're going into T3 bodies, that anti-infantry flamer it's got, it's lovely stuff. And obviously, area denial sort of things, being in the middle of the board, that's where a lot of the mission plate, often it's kind of a heat area, is there. So it serves a purpose, right? And then Gladiator Lancer. Not too surprised. So like the Eradicators, something that's got it's got rerolls built into it. Really helpful. So Switzerland and Sweden have each taken one. It's very solid. It's something that if I'm just making a pickup list for Dark Angels, a Lancer's often in there because it just some great efficiency. Like you get your bang for your buck, and they are a little bit chewy. Like if they're in cover, if you haven't used AOC yet, they can be quite a pain to deal with. So they have to really focus them down. So pretty solid. Right, and then Hellblasters. This was my surprise. I thought we'd probably see about half the list with Hellblasters. Germany were the only one, and they took the 10. Obviously, because they're going to put Azrael or some other character to lead it to really push it. Slovakia took the Lieutenant with Combi Weapon. There is a reason for this. We'll get to that when we get to their list, but it is because it's a cheap low knob. There is a specific other purpose, and his name is the Lion. But I'm not too surprised. It's all stuff that it's unusual in as much as everyone else's lists don't contain it. But it's things that if I was building a singles list, I'd look at and go, okay, I probably would like that. And again, intercessors. Only one country, Slovakia, took them. I still value it. Even just having that as a defensive backline screen to shove Azrael somewhere safe so you get your CP without fear of him just dying, because yes, he's really good to express power with putting him with ICC, so the Inner Circle Companions, but if he dies early, if someone can focus him down, doesn't matter. Like a 4-up invuln is great, but a 4-up invuln fails half the time. So if you're a bit too boisterous with it, I can see why sometimes people might want to be a bit more defensive with him and hide him somewhere. And that's something I've done quite often in singles. So, right, and then we've got aggressors. So Slovakia, again with their unusual decisions, have a unit of aggressors. I've put 1x5. I think it's actually 1x6. I just cannot write apparently. And that was, I believe, Boltstorm aggressors. So again, probably going to have a apothecary biologist with it. Fire discipline, churning out the damage, lethal hits, sustained 1. If you're in the Dev Doctrine, sustains on 5s and lethals on 5s. It's spicy stuff. It's something that if it's in a repulsor, it can just get out. Yes, they're slightly slower moving, but if that repulsor's kind of stage itself up behind the ruins, they boop out their 3-inch disembark, then they do their move. Pretty good. Obviously not in the same turn. You'd kind of stage, then get out the next turn. I don't need you guys to correct me on that, because we all know what I was meaning there. I caught it before you could get to me. But in the comments, put it anyway. Yeah, go for it. Right, and then Land Raider Redeemer. So this was the big breakout hit for me last year at the WTC. When we were all preparing for it the week kind of after the submission, I remember looking at the Polish list and going, oh, okay, a Redeemer. That's going to be quite hard to move around the board. I was wrong. I was horrendously wrong. It showed how much the Polish team had put into it, and then literally post WTC all the way up until probably Christmas time, 9 out of 10 Space Marine lists that were Gladius seemed to have a Land Raider Redeemer, biologists and aggressors in it. It was great. It still is. It's just they put the points up a little bit, so it's not necessarily the ideal pick I find at times. But South Africa seems to have some sort of secret sauce in it, so I'm interested to see what they come up with on that one. Then we got this is the stuff that starts to get more unusual. So Vindicators, so they are interesting, very swingy. Obviously we've seen some great success with them in our Chaos Space Marine kind of competitors. They were starting to appear in Ironstorm lists just before Ironstorm kind of got toned back. Then putting it into the Gladius isn't a bad shout, because obviously if you're in Dev Doctrine, they've got shorter range guns. The main gun's not the longest. I don't know why, but I can't remember the distance, but it's not great. It might be 48. I think it's shorter though, but it might be in my head. I'm wishing it was shorter. It might be 24. In fact, before we go any further, guys, I'm just going to check, because I never liked when I have these things where I'm certain of something. I'm just like, yeah, I'm just going to say it, and if it's wrong, fine. But I'm going to check. Right. So let's just check Vindicator. I want to say it's 24. Let's see if I was right. The main gun on a Vindicator is 24. The Demolisher Cannon, yeah, there we go. So if you're then advancing and shooting, can help you cut those angles as well. The changes to pivoting probably makes them a little bit easier to move around those ruins as well. You just need to poke a little bit out. And obviously tactical. Having the ability to fall back, shoot and charge across the army means those 3 Vindicators, they can't be pinned in, particularly unless you really wrap them. They're getting out, then they're shooting something. And there's not a penalty, so great. So I'm very interested to see what Spain do with that. I feel like it's going to be quite a dynamic list in that respect. Switzerland have got 1 Impulser. I feel like the Impulser lost out to everyone taking a Repulser, because I don't think you take both. At least that's what I'm seeing in the lists, and it makes sense, because you're not going to have the space, perhaps. In Scepters, there is 3 in the Swedish list. If I remember rightly, it's Bolt Storm ones rather than Plasma, so not narrative, but this isn't a narrative event, right? it makes sense. Right, so let's get started. So here's Franois from Team Canada's list. He has Azrael as a Warlord. He's got the Apothecary Biologist with Fire Discipline. He's got Judicia. He's got 5 Assault Intercessors, 3 units of Jump Assault Intercessors, the 2 units of 5 Mace Knights, 1 unit of Sword Knights, then the 6 Eradicators that are going to be with the Biologists. They're going to be in that Repulser. There is 6 Inner Circle Companions to go with the Judicia, and then there's Scouts and Callous Assassin to do some nice mission play. So this is very much, if I was going to guess on how a lot of the lists post WTC are going to land for singles, this feels it. It's got all the tools, quite dynamic. It's got some anti-vehicle stuff with the maces. The Inner Circle Companions can just chew through anything just about. Granted, some high toughness stuff might be a challenge, but in Gladius, if you're in the Assault Doctrine and you do Honour the Chapter, they're going to have AP3 swords. Unless something's got a really good invuln, it's going to hurt. And that's a lot of attacks. And people won't charge it because it's got Fight First from the Judicia. In this one, I think the Assault Intercessors are clearly with Azrael, which means there's a nice little kind of mini punch thing. So they can go and do some tasks. They can go and beat stuff up. They can hold their own. Quite survival. I think this is a very, very solid list. I'm interested to look at it as a whole of the team and kind of give a feeling for it. But I'm just rating these lists rather than in the context of the team. To me, this feels like one that's going to consistently score well. And if it's paired well, it could blow out for people quite nicely, which I think is kind of what they want, right? It should be a bit of a bully list because Deathwing Knights, unless you put enough into them, just stick around a bit too long, even in units of 5. Right, and then we've got Pascal from Germany, again, led by Azrael, a Judicia, 2 Judicias in fact. Then we've got 3 units of Deathwing Knights, but with swords, 10 Hellblasters, 5 Infiltrators, 2 units of 6 Inner Circle Companions, a Repulser, 2 units of 5 Scouts, and the Voidsmen. So the Voidsmen are very much, I feel like they're not the backline thing. Maybe the Infiltrators are, but at the same time it depends on the mission. Like, if you don't need them to be forward, they don't need to be, but they can go backwards. The Judicias and the Inner Circle Companions look like they could be in trouble if they're not kept safe. So in certain matchups, they could be in the Repulser. That could be the Hellblasters. Obviously, if the Hellblasters are being led by Azrael, you don't get CP if he's in a transport, so they're probably not going to be in the transport because they've got the 4-up invuln. So as long as they're hidden in a nice ruin at line of sight, they'll be okay. And maybe that's how you get the Inner Circle Companions up there, is you've shoved them in a Repulser, they yeet up, job done. This one feels a little bit more like how I was expecting some of the singles lists have been turning out. The lack of jump pack intercessors worries me a little bit for mission play, so maybe this one is literally just about just shoving it down someone's throat even more so, and that's where teams kind of has that whole thing of expressing kind of the difference. Right, now I've got Nicholas from Slovakia. This is one of my favourite lists. I don't think it's the best list, but I love it for how ambitious it is. Taking this to WTC feels terrifying. So we've got Azrael, he's not the Warlord because he cannot be the Warlord in this list because of someone else. Apothecary Biologists, they're with Fire Discipline as per usual, with Aggressors, the Boltstorm Aggressors. Then there's the Lieutenant with the Combi Weapon, who, if you remember when we were chatting about all the different units, I said he was here because he's with the Lion. So the idea behind this is you've got the Lion moving forward, and he needs to be within 3 inches of an infantry unit to gain lone op. You put him next to a lone op dude, he does that, and this is the only Space Marine that is a lone op natively, naturally. He's cheap. He's like 55 points. Why wouldn't you? Then we've got 5 intercessors, which I imagine Azrael's probably going to link into if required, but in this situation I think he goes with the Inner Circle Companions, which I think is really kind of nice because it gives them the hybrid. So if you go for a Judicia, you get the fight first, but you don't have an invuln. If you go with a Librarian, you get the invuln, but you don't get any kind of force multiplication to the unit's output. Azrael gives them sustained hits 1, gives them the 4-up invuln, feels a nice place, right? Then touched on the aggressors already. 2 units of 5 assault, jump, pack, intercessors. Love them. I think 2 is always the minimum I want to see in a list, if I can, until the points go up. And then they've got 2 units of 5 Deathwing Knights with maces, so that's the anti-vehicle stuff in the list. Inner Circle Companions, which are going with Azrael, I think. And then the Repulser. So this Repulser probably has the aggressors in to do the job that the Land Raider Redeemer used to do this time last year. Obviously, in certain matchups, you could rapid ingress them in. As a result, you could then put the Inner Circle Companions in there. There is that flexibility. Having a transport that can work for either unit gives you choice. I think there is very much a set goal, and they've probably planned out what they're going to do, and there'll be certain matchups where they probably will want to kind of switch things around. I don't know. And then 2 units of 5 scouts, because if you get paired in something that's got lots of scouting, having that infiltration kind of pressure and kind of screen just keeps people honest. They can't come out too far, which I miss it when I don't have it. Right, and then we've got Anthony Bernato from South Africa. He's got Azrael leading his army. He's got a biologist with fire discipline. Shocking, I know. And then 3 times 5 Deathwing Knights with maces. Again, not a shocker. What you bring the best, right? If you're going to Worlds. Then 6 Eradicators to go with the biologists. 5 infiltrators, so to do that screening thing, maybe even being a pressure thing. I don't entirely get where they'll put them. I think it depends. I think to me it'd still be a backfield objective on this on this list, purely because they don't have other stuff, because the scouts will be on your 2 flanks perhaps. Then 6 Inner Circle Companions, which are going to be going with Azrael. Then there's a Land Raider Redeemer and a Repulser Executioner. The Executioner can be a transport, but I don't think that's why it's in the list. I think it's here as a chewy vehicle with a bit of anti-vehicle, a little bit. It's got like 16 attacks of its defense array, which just can kill some chaff. It's interesting. It's a list that I look at and go, okay, I haven't seen a Repulsor Executioner on the table for a while. And then I was like, but why? And then I looked, they're only 220 points. It's at that point where you're like, that's only a little bit more than buying a Lancer. It's 60 points more than a Lancer. So if I can justify not quite having a 3rd unit of scouts in, why not? It's a chunkier version. It's got a 2-up save. It's something really, really nice. So another interesting list. I don't feel it's one to not consider at least doing well. And now we've got the Spain list from Guillermo. This is one that really surprised me. So this is Apothecary Biologist as the Warlord. No Azrael. He's got Fire Discipline, as you'd expect. 1 unit of 5 Jump Assault Intercessors, doing their thing, being that scoring piece for him. Then it's 3 units of 5 Deathwing Knights, all with swords. So these are just going for tons of attacks, hitting something hard, hitting them at a relative speed, probably rapid ingressing in 1 unit, maybe then turn 3 another one, and maybe having 1 on the board. I don't know. Like, maybe he's using Teleport Homers very well. We don't know. And then there is a Repulsor with the 6 Eradicators, which the biologist is obviously joining. 5 Infiltrators. So that's the backfield kind of covered. 2 units of Scouts covering the front ground. And then this is the Spice. 3 Vindicator tanks. As when we were chatting through all the different units earlier, they've got quite short range. 24 inches on their main battle cannon. It's the Demolisher Cannon, the Vindicators kind of battle cannon thing is very cool. It's very swingy, but if you're shooting into an oath target, not such a problem, I guess. Still quite swingy, giving it Devastator Doctrine so that it can advance and shoot, cut those angles, really nice. Tactical to fall back, shoot and charge, so if someone tries to tag it, you're just sodding off and then just shooting them anyway. Shooting another target that you weren't in combat with, it's fine. Because obviously if you're in combat with the Vindicator, because of its shovel, it doesn't suffer the penalties. It's just really useful. This is one that I'm very curious to see how it plays, because it does seem very light on other things to do stuff. I know that there's the scouts and the intercessors. It feels like it's a pressure list. It's going to score, to me it doesn't feel like it scores as strongly as some other units, other armies do, but it's got the output that most of them have, plus 3 Vindicators. So we'll see. I could be completely wrong, but this is what I'm really excited to see, because I don't quite get it, and that's fine. But Guillermo obviously has a plan, and no one expects the Spanish Vindicators. Right, and then we've got Yesper from Sweden. He's got Azrael. He's got the Biologist as well. 5 Assault Intercessors, this time with a Plasma Pistol rather than the Hand Flamer. 3 units of 5 Jump Assault Intercessors, and then the 2 Mace units and the Sword unit for the Deathwing Knights, which seems to be the breakpoint people are going with to give themselves some flexibility. Biologist's friend in the form of the 6 Eradicators. This has got the Lancer, but it's got the Repulser as well. So the Repulser will be for the Eradicators, I think, and then 2 units of 5 Scouts again. So you're seeing a pattern here. There's your Scouts going forward, infiltrating, keeping them honest. You've got a way of getting your damage dealers up there. Your jump pack intercessors doing all your actions. Azrael bringing up a unit that's just going to go and be a pain. In the case of this one, I think it's the assault intercessors. And then the Deathwing Knights rapid ingressing in. That's what they do. You might want one of them starting on the table, but they'll take forever unless they are set in stone going to go to somewhere. But you never know. 2 could come in a turn, because 1, if they've got a teleport homer successfully deployed on the table, they could rapid ingress for free and then still do it. So you never know. Right, and then we've got Antonio from Switzerland. This one is an Azrael list with the Biologists, and then the Judicia. He has the points left over that he could give the Judicia the Honor Vehement, which just gives him a bit of a buff, gives him some extra attacks and strength, which I think if you've got the points spare, because it's that thing with Space Marines, if you've got your 15, 20 points left, there's not that many things you can do with them. So that's one that I feel like can often help, especially if you've got one character that you're going to want to put into melee, like the Judicia there. Then 5 Assault Intercessors, Plasma Pistol, Power Fist on Sergeant, and Repulser with the Shield Dome. So this feels like the Judicia and his 6 Inner Circle Companions are going in that Repulser. Then the Repulser is going to have the Biologists with the 6 Eradicators. Then there's only 5 Scouts as a result, but there is 2 units of 5 Jump Assault Intercessors, and then there is 1 of each type of Deathwing Knights. So this one feels like it's trying to be a bit more of everywhere. Like the 2 Lancers, they're shooting whatever they want to. They don't have to be going into your Oath target. The Inner Circle Companions like going into an Oath target, especially if you've got Sustain 2 as the profile that you're trying to use, or even the Lethals, because you're just forcing the success there. And then with Azrael, if you've got a Lethal, having the Sustained as well. It's interesting, right? But it'll obviously be the Judicia with them this time around. But it's that choice, right? You've got that option there. I really like this list because it's got a surprising amount of vehicles in it. They're all the cheap ones. The Repulser is the most expensive at 220. It definitely gives some anti-vehicle outside of the Deathwing Knights, which is why you're only seeing the 2 units. This, I feel like they've not tried perhaps using 3 units, or maybe he doesn't own 3. And that's the interesting thing. Some of these lists you look at and go, okay, but why don't they have that? And depending on the size and kind of the community of that country, they may not have had the reps to the extreme where someone like the US, where they've just chained through them, they've played TTS for days. Same with Poland. They'll have worked out the most efficient option of how many of them to take, which way, seeing often the 2 maces and the sword. So the 3 units in total. So this might just be a simple case of this guy, that's all he owns of them. It might be that this is what he found worked for him, and that's what I find fascinating about the team's environment. There is not always a right way to play a list or to form a list for a faction, especially when the other 7 armies that are going with it in the format may do a very different role to what, say, the German list. His list's very different to this, but if the 7 other armies that are together with them are very different again, the composition then may require it. And that's what I find fascinating about teams. There isn't just, this is the optimum version of the army. There's options. Right, so, and now, this one, John Lennon from USA. If I was to make an assumption of what we will see copy-pasted in singles, right or wrong that it's the right option or not, but because it's John Lennon, and because it is so aggressively pushing the Deathwing Knights, but it's also got all the scoring tools, I feel like this is the one we'll see a lot, or at least a very similar iteration of it. And to be fair, a lot of the other units, other army lists that we've seen aren't a million miles different. So, but this one I thought was quite interesting because he's got Azrael, Biologist, Judicia. Surprise, surprise, those 3 characters, as per usual. He's got the Assault Intercessors against that five-man unit of cheap battle line that can be put with someone. In this situation, I think, based on the Inner Circle Command, is going to be the Judicia, Apothecary, Biologist is going to be with the Eradicators. It's probably going to be Azrael's like defensive unit. So rather than it being a sticky unit, because I've done that with the Intercessors, it's a turn 3, turn 4. Your backline doesn't need them kind of hiding away. They've gone up kind of as a second wind for one of your flanks, and can be a right pain. Because as a result, it's OC 11 if they're at full strength, and if they're attacking an objective, obviously Assault Intercessors we can easily forget. If they're fighting into something, they get to reroll 1s to wound. But if they're fighting something that's on an objective, they're rerolling 2 wound. Really, really spicy. I really like them. He's got a hand flamer with them, so obviously that's to take into account your T3 friends, so your elves, your guardsmen, not GSC because no one's taken them. And then he's got the 2 units of jump Assault Intercessors, very useful. And then we've got the 2 units of 5 maces for the Deathwing Knights, and then a unit of swords. Again, that flexibility. I think if you go 3 maces, you're just going, these are good at hitting things. And in Space Marines, when you don't have something like them, or the swords, or the Inner Circle Companions, where they've got the 5 attacks, or even the Assault Intercessors, when they're less attacks than that, you start to miss it. You do miss the volume. And then he's got the 5 Infiltrators, so they can be just screening out your deployment zone. They don't necessarily need to be on your objective because you've got Voidsman arms to do that. Then he's got the Repulser for putting the Eradicators up the field. This seems to be very much a very key thing that I hadn't really been considering in my lists, was the Repulser, and seeing it kind of have a resurgence now. I'm glad that I built and painted one at the beginning of the edition. And then the Calidus Assassin, because making your opponent's stratagems cost more CP is great. And having a lone op that isn't just the combi weapon lieutenant is useful. And if you're going into those T3 bodies, that anti-infantry flamer, it can just cause some mayhem. And I do appreciate it. So this is a list I'm really interested to see how it gets on. Obviously, John is a very, very, very experienced player. So this is seeing Warhammer at its top level. I don't want to discount any of the lists. They're all a little bit different. There is very much an overarching theme to it. What I find interesting at that is it tells me that a lot of the players have understood the Pariah Nexus balanced data slate changes quite quickly. I think we all learned quite quickly what was working for us, but what I've found interesting is how varied it can be. Like the Inner Circle Companions, I have a slight bias towards them because I really appreciate their go up, but the Deathwing Knights do work, and that -1 damage really does help them. Right, so let's look at the key units. So everyone's taken Azrael basically. I would be surprised not to. So for his points, he's great because he gets you a CP every battle round. He gives a unit 4-up invuln. Sustained hits 1 in combat or shooting. So he's very flexible. He can go onto a lot of units. You can sometimes, if you really wanted to, you don't have to put him on a unit. I think it's a waste. But if you really needed to just have something, like have him hiding, if they haven't got the presence to kind of project their power and deal with him, like if they haven't got deep striking units, or you've got enough stuff that will screen him out nicely, just having him sat on your home objective could work for you. I don't know, because he could sit and cap the objective and stop a 3-inch deep strike. Deathwing Knights, so the hammer guys being anti-tank, they're survivable. The weight of attacks for the swords, because they're 5 attacks, really appreciate that. They are AP 2 as well and damage 2, so they are not gonna struggle to blend through your power armored bodies. The only time they maybe struggle is if they're going into some inbuns, because it can be swingy. And then Inner Circle Companions, they're always gonna be in a list. I saw them less than I expected, but I think it's also because if you don't give them a defensive character of Azrael or the Librarian, you don't get as much survivability out of them, but you also don't get the fights first you'd love from the Judicia. I still really like Asmodai as an option for them, but without having that invuln, he's a cute pick, and I see why he wasn't taken. It didn't surprise me. I was kind of secretly hoping that there'd be one team that had brought him and could prove everyone else wrong, but yeah, he's not that good. Well, he's good. He's good enough. He's not great, and that's what you got to remember for these lists. There isn't space to be cute, because if you try to be too cute, you're not letting yourself down. You're letting 7 other players, your captain, coaches, people at home watching. There's a lot of pressure. People want to bring and put their best foot forward. So it doesn't surprise me too much, but at the same time, there's only one lion. Sad. Right, then other key units. Biologists, the Apothecary Biologists. Why wouldn't you take them? If you're building a Gladius list, you're not taking Hellblasters, your shooting unit, whether it's Aggressors or Eradicators, which Eradicators generally are the ones we're seeing now, giving them lethal hits, giving them exploding 5s and 6s with a stratagem. Why wouldn't you have it? And Fire Discipline, so you've got those great quality melter shots that have got full rerolls, giving them a way of generating more. Why wouldn't you have that? Like lethals and sustained, exploding on 5s, full rerolls to hit, and then full rerolls to wound. It's nice. Obviously, if you're not going to a vehicle kind of list, it can be a bit sad, but that's the joy of teams. You're going to get paired into something where they'll have some juicy targets if things go right. The Repulser is the next one. So the fact they can hold 7 Gravis bodies, that's the big lop it had recently. That's why I think we're seeing it now popping up, and it's really cool. It's surprisingly tanky. It's not as survivable at times as an Impulsor, because it's a bit harder to hide. But with the WTC formats boards, I don't think you're going to struggle too much. And if you really need to, Armor Contempt. It's your friend, right? And you'll have spare CP because you've got Azrael in your list. Then we've got the Assault Intercessors with jump packs. It's that age-old thing that they are fast-moving infantry. They've got access to throwing grenades. When they finish a charge, if they're in engagement range on a 4-up, they do mortal wounds. What's not to like? And they're 85 points for 5. It's just like, come on, guys. Mwah! It's amazing. And that's why I'm not surprised to see 2s, because 2 units of 5 is what I like to take. I'm not the best player, but if I like it, it must be good. Like, if I'm constantly, like, I build a list, it's like 2 units of Scouts, 2 units of Assault Intercessors with jump packs. If that's where a list always starts, for no matter what detachment, they must be good, right? And then we've got Scouts. Scouts were still there. The fact they've got the Infiltrate is the way of getting nice Infiltrate for cheap, because yes, Infiltrators could do it, but they are 100 points. These guys are 65 points each, and if they're outside of 6 inches at the end of your opponent's movement end of your opponent's turn, you can pick them up and put them in strat reserves. And the way that the mission pack now works, a lot of the missions are about board edges and those sort of areas. So there's those hot spaces now where you need to be wholly within 9 of a board edge to get 3 points. Scouts are perfect for that. If you've got 2 units of Scouts that you can lift up and then you draw that, that turn you're like, okay, these guys are just going to go there. That scores me 6 points on a secondary. What's not to love? And that's 130 points for those 2 units. It's brilliant. Then we got Eradicators. As we saw, they're in most of the lists, giving them full rerolls into. They get full rerolls into vehicles and monsters. If they're given the Biologists lethal hits, and Fire Discipline giving them sustained 1, having that full rerolls and those two things combined, they're just consistent. They've got great levels of output, and it's just nice. And even if it's not a vehicle or a monster, if it's, say, some really annoying things like Deathwing Knights, even, like, yes, getting like D6 shots, like D6 damage shots into something like a damage that they essentially need to do 5 damage into a Deathwing Knight to kill it outright. That means you're probably spiking, but you can reroll. You can reroll. Why wouldn't you? And I don't think that's a bad thing. So they've got some great flexibility there. And then the Judicia. The Judicia going in that one unit of Inner Circle companions to give them fight first. It means that, yes, they're not as survivable, but if your opponent wants to charge them or come near them, they're in trouble. If they charge something next to them, you heroically intervene them in and you go, uh-oh, non-active player with fights first, I feel like I'm going first now, buddy. And that's rough. That as a tech piece is great. And that combined with the Lion. So having those two units where you've got these two fight first elements, it deters people getting into combat with you, which I think is really kind of nice. And that's why I'm really excited to see what Slovakia comes out with for the event. All right. And then key enhancements. There was only 2. No surprise, fire discipline, Eradicators go boom. I've gone over that so many times in this video. You all know. You all love it. The one that did surprise me a little bit is the Honor Veilment. I jokingly kind of put in my notes here purely because of the spare points. It often gets taken because there is those spare points. Because the way Space Marine lists often work, you end up with that weird kind of hodgepodge, like 20, 30 points where you can't quite get the big, like a whole unit in. But something like this where you've got one Judicia, being able to just give them a buff to their strength, extra attacks, and then it triggers off in the Assault Doctrine, if I remember rightly, means if you're on your go turn with that unit, it's getting some extra attacks through it, and that can make the difference. So if you've got the spare 15 points, why wouldn't you? So as much as I like to joke, if the points are there spare, why wouldn't you? Because you're not getting anything for saying you're starting the game at 1980. No one likes a hero. Right, so what's next, guys? So after WTC, I will do a run through of the event. Obviously, we're going to see a lot of the event through live streaming. So Wargames Live are there. The Glasshammer guys are doing coverage of all the England matches. I believe there's the French going as well. There's going to be a lot of video content out and about in the wild. Whilst I'm there coaching, I will try my best to kind of keep my head to the ground, listen and hear what's going on. I'll be whispering to people, kind of doing little signals, kind of going, so you're a Dark Angels player, should we talk? And it'll be interesting. After the dust has settled for all of this, it'll be very interesting to then look at kind of this video where I've kind of gone through the lists and kind of my expectations, how they are, and then see what the reality is. Because obviously there could be something where I'm just going, oh, that's definitely doing that and that's doing that, and then they play it in a very different way into different armies, and it'll be very interesting to then learn, because I'm not the innovator. That I will try things, I'll experiment, but quite often seeing how other people look at these things gives me a whole new fresh perspective, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? Like, guys, we can learn so much from that. And then talking of learning, the future video that's coming after that is called Gathering, Storm, and On. So what I'm going to be doing is I've started making notes now. So post the Gathering Storm narrative event at the end of 7th edition, we've had an awful lot of developments, kind of breadcrumbs of developments for Dark Angels lore. It's all scattered across multiple different books, campaign books, a handful of novels. So I'm very much going to give you a TLDR of the lore. So understanding, like, Gathering Storm ends with Cypher on Terra. Most people don't know that actually there has been a resolution of what happened when he was on Terra. He doesn't just disappear. He gets arrested by the custodians. But what happens then? There is a novel, and I'll give you a breakdown of that, and it's quite interesting. And then I'll run through, probably in the next video after the WTC stuff, because I don't want to dilute that with me stuff. But I'll do a video about how I'm getting on with the Risen angle I'm throwing into my Dark Angels. So at the moment I've got a Deimos pattern Predator Destructor on my desk. I'm painting that up for my local league because I've got a modern one, doesn't look right, and I really want it to match with my Inner Circle companions. And I'm going to just kind of drip feed and give you my suggestions of what I'm doing to give a unique spin on the army. And obviously prepping for the LGT, because there is the narrative event I'm going through for that instead. And that should be nice and exciting. Thank you everyone for tuning in. Obviously, if you liked the video, don't forget to hit the like button below. I know that might sound silly, but that really helps us with the algorithm. It then tells YouTube that people that have watched it really liked it. And if they've searched for Dark Angels and found this and really liked it, it then means it will spill it towards more people that like our stuff. And it means like more Inner Circle guys get involved in the Inner Circle, which is great. And of course, if you really enjoy it, subscribe to the channel. I put one of these out probably every week or so. There won't be one next week because I will be at the WTC itself. I will be diligently making notes. I will be there with, I've got a microphone, I've got my iPad. I'll be trying to do some recording where I can between rounds. It should be interesting. Hopefully I'm going to try to capture some of the 8 guys that have taken Dark Angels to see if I can chat to them. They might not want to, they might be a bit busy, they might not want to spill the beans during the middle of a tournament, but you never know. And of course, if you really like our channel and you're already subscribed, you're already following, you've hit the bell, because if you hit the bell for the notifications, every time I put one of these up, it will send you a message saying, uh-oh, Scrivo's done another video, what's he got wrong this time? You can, of course, become a YouTube member. If you become a YouTube member, you get access to the secret part of the 6++ Discord. I like to secretly call it the Inner Circle. No one else calls it that. But until next time, guys, have fun. Take care.